Good afternoon, everyone. What a beautiful day to watch the birds of prey right here in our own backyard. We couldn't ask for a better day, and a great group to show us the birds. And I'd like to pass the mic over to Susan. She's been instrumental in putting this program together and connecting all the dots, and I'd like to introduce her to say a few words. Susan?
Thank you all so much for being here. Before we start, please silence your phones or iPads or whatever you might have with you. As Britt said, I've been involved with the Birds of Prey. I've actually been on the board for 20 years, which is kind of nuts. But I'm really excited about the opportunity that the birds have given us to come here today with some birds to fly for you all. I'm going to introduce our special guest. Ladies first, Audrey Ray is Director of Education at the center. And Audrey has been there 20 years, 15, on 18 years. And when she's in charge of our, what do you call it, the breeding program, the captive breeding program. So she takes home the little birds to incubate them. And she has 3 little children, and they know and they love all the birds. And Stephen Schabel is our president and CEO. Stephen's been with the birds for 25 years, 24 years. He's a Charleston native, went to Portugal, and now he's in charge. So, without further ado, here's Stephen.
Awesome. Thank you, Susan. I'm going to do my best to be as loud as I possibly can and maybe not use the microphone. Is that okay? Am I loud enough that you in the back can hear me? Or is this better? That's better. Okay. All right. I hear you. I tend to sometimes talk with my hands a little bit, and so sometimes I may do this, but we'll see. We'll see. First of all, thanks, Susan, for not only all that she does for us at the center, but also for orchestrating this ability for us to come out here and chat with you all about our work in your backyard, which is a lot of fun to do. Brought the A-team today. We've got some really interesting birds to share with you. I know many of you, I've met many of you in the past, so I know some of this may be review information for you, but I want to kind of give you an overview of what we do at the center and how that work has progressed over the last 35 years. This is our 35th anniversary, by the way, which is a big deal for us. I appreciate that. It's something that has been made possible by all of you, so we thank you for your involvement with us over the years. But 35 years ago, there was this need here in the Low Country for someone to deal with birds that ended up in trouble. And I know you have all experienced that probably. I know we were talking a minute ago about a red-tailed hawk right here on your campus, and birds that end up in trouble, generally they're ending up in trouble because of us. And that's kind of a rough circumstance. They get hit by cars or tangled in things or shot or poisoned. And 35 years ago, our founder decided that he wanted to do something about that. And since then, we've worked to the best that we could in a variety of different ways to solve those problems, whether it's through medical care of injured birds or through educational programs. We want to help people understand that, yes, we are the problem, right? But also, yes, we can be the solution to the problem as well, right? We can do things differently and improve on our actions and so on. So my job for the last 23 years or so has been to share these awesome birds with you, and I don't get to do it as much today as I did in my old days, but it's great to be here and sharing these birds with you. Audrey has been, again, with the center for as long as anyone other than me and Jim, so she knows these birds like the back of her hand, but she's got a new job now as well as Director of Operations. She has to step away a little bit from this, so it'll be fun for us to come out here and test some of our old skills with birds and bring them to you. I'm hoping you'll all have lots of questions as we go through today, and a reminder for those of you maybe that have not experienced one of our programs, maybe out of curiosity, how many of you have not seen one of our programs before? All All right, so Audrey, there's all your targets for today. We have this really awesome opportunity with many of the birds that we work with to bring them a lot closer to you than you generally get to experience birds. Those of you that have seen it before, you've probably had a bird fly right over your head, and that'll be our goal today, will be to get these birds kind of as close to you as we can, bring them right over you if we can, so that you can experience them, again, in ways that maybe you would not have experienced them before. So be ready for that. Just be ready for a bird flying right over your head. We're going to do our best to get them as close to you as we can. We've got 3 birds with us that are a part of our educational collection, and they'll represent different groups of birds of prey. And again, hopefully you'll have questions, and we can make it a conversation as much as anything else. So with that, we're going to get our first bird out. In our early days, our focus was entirely on dealing with what we call the birds of prey. Those are the hawks and the eagles and the owls and the falcons. Sometimes they're called raptors. They have these grasping claws on their feet that they use to catch and kill their food. And this first bird will be a good example, sort of a starting point to talk about raptors. This is a species native to the southwestern deserts here in the United States. I actually saw one in downtown Phoenix, Arizona a few weeks ago when I was there on spring break on vacation. He was perched on a light post looking around the street for whatever prey he might find. But it's called a Harris hawk. It's very similar to the red-tailed hawk that you would expect to see here on Bishop Gadsden campus, or maybe the red-shouldered hawk that you might hear as it's cruising around. You've got both of those here in South Carolina, but a bird that we would find in the desert. And from an educational standpoint, from utilizing birds to teach with standpoint, these birds are the all-purpose birds for us. Maybe it's not obvious, but I'll make sure to make it clear that this is not a normal thing for a bird to do. Right? To be here in the middle of this beautiful park with all of you staring at it, and to be standing here calmly saying, hey, what do you want me to do next? Right? When was the last time you were ever this close to a bird? Chances are it probably hasn't happened, right? Because they see us and they want to get away from us. Well, again, this is a unique ambassador bird that's been trained to do this. He's actually been a part of our demonstration team for almost 20 years now. Hatched as a part of a breeding program in Louisiana and joined us here in South Carolina. But this species, because of an interesting sort of facet of their natural history, is one that tends to do really well working as a team. These are cooperative hunters in the wild, which is a unique thing in the world of birds. We don't see a lot of birds that work as a team, work as a family unit, but these will work together to hunt rabbits. And the cool thing about that is that means this little 1-pound bird can actually feed on a rabbit that might weigh 5 or 6 pounds. So he's hunting prey that's larger than he is, and the way that he can accomplish that is by working with a team. Right? We all know teamwork makes the dream work. And for Harris hawks, that's the way of the world. They work as a family, and all together they can do things that they wouldn't be able to accomplish on their own. You can see the desert when you look at them. At least I feel like I see the desert when I look at him. All that red and brown and orange and black in the color palette. He looks like a desert animal. He's exceptionally well camouflaged out there in those arid habitats. But he's got that big white stripe on his tail and that big white patch on his rump. That's a communication tool. That's a way that a bird like this one can locate the other members of his hunting party. If you're going to work cooperatively, you've got to be able to find those teammates, and that white stripe allows him to do just that. Back to the basics about these raptors. They have those grasping feet and curved beaks and eyes on the front of their head. We'll see that same set of adaptations in all 3 of the birds we look at today. And those tools kind of create the opportunity for these birds to live the lifestyle that they do. Catch and kill things with their feet with those razor-sharp talons, and then use that curved beak to tear whatever large prey animal you catch into small, manageable, bite-sized pieces. And then ultimately utilizing your eyes primarily as a food location tool. So I mentioned at the beginning we deal with a lot of problems, right? That's one of the natures of our organization, is that we see these birds, each one of about 1,000 patients a year that come through our hospital, provide us with a little glimpse into what's happening out in the world. And as you might imagine, one of the biggest issues, especially for this group of birds, I mentioned I saw one perched on a utility pole on the side of the road in downtown Phoenix. What's going to happen to a bird if he's hunting for long enough from a utility pole on on the side of the road in downtown Phoenix. He's going to get hit by a vehicle. It's unfortunately the most common problem that we see for many of these birds. I live here on James Island, and I see red-tailed hawks and red-shouldered hawks perched on the utility poles on the James Island connector and all over the place. And unfortunately, that's a really challenging issue to resolve, but we can chip away at it. We talk all the time about keeping the highway edge clean and not littering with food that might attract prey for animals like this, and keeping those highways as unpleasant as possible for the animals that we don't want to attract there, right? And if we don't attract them to the road, then perhaps we can keep them safe from vehicle collisions. Lots of other issues that they deal with, and we'll talk about some more of those, but I want to see if anybody has any questions. I love questions because that guides me. Yes? Do they eat squirrels? So here in South Carolina, a bird of this size, a red-tailed hawk, it would be the most common, is going to be a squirrel specialist, right? So you can feel good about that. A Harris hawk and a gray squirrel, kind of an unfair matchup, if you will. Gray squirrels, if you look at this guy's feet when you see him up close, his feet are kind of small. His toes are a little bit narrow, and squirrels have a really powerful tool to protect themselves in their teeth, right? Teeth that are built for ripping through the hulls of nuts and seeds and things. A bird like this, if he caught a squirrel and didn't grab it by the head, he might lose a toe. So it's kind of a prey that would be challenging for him. But the red-tailed hawk that you have here, and we've got all over North America, they are built for the gray squirrel. They've got big, thick, heavily armored toes, and squirrels are no problem. That said, even though I know I have a healthy red-tailed hawk population in my neighborhood, I still saw 6 squirrels driving out on my way to work today. This is the time of year the squirrels are everywhere. You just have to be conscious and comfortable in the fact that if you've got squirrels, you've got hawks hunting them as well. Yeah, great question. Yes, sir.
In Arizona, when do they breed?
In Arizona, when do they breed? That's a great question. So Arizona is a little different because it's kind of always hot and dry there. It's always spring and summer, basically. But generally, the raptors are spring and summer breeders. So the Harris hawk would be entering its breeding season, would have entered its breeding season probably a month or two ago. Probably incubating eggs currently and hatching chicks in the next month or so. And very similar to our red-tailed hawks, they're doing that same thing right here. And actually, we have a pair of Harris hawks at our center that are a part of our breeding program. And here in South Carolina, they take advantage of the fact that our climate is a lot more moderate, and they actually will reproduce multiple times during an annual cycle, which is pretty cool. They can breed 2 or 3 times in a year because the weather is good enough for them for that. Great question. What other questions do we have? Go ahead. So, great question. How do we train these birds to do this, right? I said how strange this is for a bird to do the things that he does. So how do we get him to the point that, A, he's willing to sit on Audrey's glove and be this close to her and fly right over your heads and be that close to you? It's all positive reinforcement. So I was trained as a teacher. Any of you that are teachers in the audience, I have the utmost respect for you because I realized pretty quickly that I wasn't cut out for being in the classroom with students. But teachers know that positive reinforcement is a really powerful tool, right? Ask the animal, whatever animal it is that you're dealing with, child, student, husband, whatever. Ask them to do something that they're capable of doing and better yet, likely to do. And then when they do it, you give them something that they want as a reward. That's all this is about with this bird. Right? He knows that Audrey's going to ask him to do something, and if he does what she asks, he's going to be rewarded. Now, obviously, it doesn't start out in the open like this, all around you, and with free opportunity to fly away if you were to choose to. But it starts much smaller and often inside, but just reward him when he does what he's likely to do. Yeah. You might notice too, though, that there is a safety net, right? So on his tail, he has a little antenna there. That's a radio transmitter, and that's our security policy, our insurance policy, right? Even though this guy is a well-seasoned professional, I'm not worried he's going to fly away. There's always that chance. He could if he wanted to. And so if he does, we've got to make sure we can find him again, and that's where that antenna comes in. So that's the backup plan. We don't want to have to use that backup plan today.
How old is he?
How old is he?
How did he find his way?
And how did he end up here? Right, so this bird he hatched in 2007. I met him just off of Bourbon Street in New Orleans, Louisiana in 2007. He and his brother joined our flight team then. So that makes him almost 20. He'll be 20 next year. He's 19 years old. And he found his way here like many of our birds. So for us, we have our educational collection. I know many of you have visited the center before. We've got about 110 birds that are a part of our teaching team, if you will. And those birds come from a couple of different categories. About half of them are birds that came through our hospital and couldn't be released back into the wild. They have some injury or issue that would prevent them from hunting successfully. And then the other half, like this guy, and actually all three of the birds that we brought with us today, are birds that were bred as a part of conservation breeding programs. So one of the things with birds that you're probably aware of, but if you're not, I'll make you aware of it now, is that in general, bird populations are declining at an alarming rate all over the planet. We've lost 30% of the world's birds just in the last few decades. 40% of the bird of prey species in the world are considered endangered or critically endangered, right? So they're not in general, right? We could find examples, of course, where populations are healthy or growing, but in many cases, including the Harris hawk, their populations are declining. There's not as much suitable desert for them to live in anymore, and as a consequence, we don't have as many of them as we once did. Now, there are a couple of possible outcomes there, right? We could see things continue to go in the direction that they're going in, right? Down, 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 and that ends us with extinction, right? Obviously, that is not the preferred outcome, right? That's not where we want it to go. The other option would be, let's address some of these issues and maybe see that number go up and up and up again, and come off of endangered status. And one of the tools for that is what we call conservation breeding. So that bird was bred as a part of a breeding program. He hatched in captivity. And ultimately, while he won't be released back into the wild, his genetic information in the form of his offspring or his offspring's offspring could be utilized in a restoration project. We deal with a few species where they're currently being bred and released back into the wild to help bolster those wild numbers. So the next bird we're going to see is actually a great success story in that way. So a way that we have turned around a problem that was happening back when I was a kid. This was an endangered species. It was actually a species that was extinct in the eastern United States, believe it or not. And now they're quite common. We see them all over the place. So we'll get to her in just a minute. Any other questions about the Harris hawk or anything this far? Yeah. Great. Life expectancy. So how long do they live in captivity and in the wild? So I'll answer that in two ways. We'll start with average life expectancy. So that would be, how long can one of these birds, maybe a red-tailed hawk or a Harris hawk, expect to live in the wild on average? What would you guess if you had to throw a number out there?
10 years.
10 years average. Anybody want to throw out a different guess? Because 10 years isn't the right answer. 40 years. Okay, we can try again, because 40 isn't the right answer either. Remember, average. That means we have to take into account all the bad things that might happen when you're young and all that. 5. Now we're getting close, right? Average life expectancy for a red-tailed hawk here in North America and South Carolina, the ones that live in our backyard, about 2 years. And that always shocks people. It's always one of those questions. I answer it and I get that same response regardless, right? Because you think, man, how could a predator at the top of the food web only live that long? And it's pretty simple, right? If we think about humans, right? I have an 18-year-old child and a 13-year-old child, so they've already greatly outlived the wild life expectancy of a red-tailed hawk, right? They're almost 10 times as old as a red-tailed hawk would live on average. And then I start thinking, why are my children able to reach such ripe old ages with no trouble at all? And it's because of me, right? Because I will continue to take care of them if it's anything like my parents and me until they're like 50 years old, right? And some of you can relate, right? You may have children that you still help support, right? If I ask, my parents are going to help me, and I'm 52 years old. So red-tailed hawk, on the other hand, about 10 weeks of parental care. Right, so imagine how different that circumstance is. You only get mom and dad taking care of you for 10 weeks, and then see you later, you're out on your own. Hope you make it. Hope you don't starve to death. Hope you don't get eaten by something. And that creates that low average life expectancy. So you generally don't live very long. Potential now we're talking 40 years, right? Or maybe even longer. That Harris hawk is 20 almost, right? We have birds in our educational collection that are in their 40s, and we know that they can live a very long time. The example I always like to throw out there with potential life expectancy, and this might be familiar to some of y'all, there's an albatross that lives in the Pacific Ocean. It's a wild bird that's nesting on Midway Atoll out in the Pacific Ocean. She's 72 years old. right? And that blows everybody's mind, right? 72-year-old bird. And the thing that gets me every time, still actively reproducing, right? Laying eggs every year, 72 years old, right? So obviously that's an extreme case, right? That's a really lucky bird that's been able to make it that long without any of the bad things happening that could happen. So potential versus average, very different. Great question.
I have one.
Yes.
What is their hunting time? What is their...
So when are they active? When are they hunting? When are they doing the things that they're doing? So, and I'll introduce this next bird too after this question, and we'll keep the questions going along. So it depends on the bird, right? But like you and me, they tend to be sort of creatures of habit, and they tend to take the times of the day that are most optimum for hunting. So for the daytime hunters, like a Harris hawk or a red-tailed hawk or a red-shouldered hawk, it's going to be generally dawn and dusk. Those are the best options, right? It's nice and cool. You still have a little bit of being concealed by it's still not really light and the prey can't see you and you can sneak up on them. If you're hungry and you don't have any luck at dawn and dusk, you don't just quit for the middle of the day, right? You hunt as long as you can throughout as much of that daylight period as you can. Now, some of the birds of prey, and we'll get to them in a minute, are nocturnal hunters. So some of them are active when it's dark. But in the same way, if you're a nocturnal hunter and you didn't have any success last night and the sun comes up, you don't just say, well, I got to wait till dark. You keep working at it until you're successful. It's something a lot of people don't factor in when they think about wildlife, is the very thin margin that most wild animals live on all the time. Right? In many cases, and it may make you feel sad or uncomfortable or whatever, but in many cases, wild animals are basically starving to death all the time. If I don't eat today, or if I don't eat tonight, I'm not going to make it until tomorrow. That's a feeling that I have never experienced. And so it takes a minute to wrap your head around that idea. You don't just sit and wait and hope that food's going to show up. You get out there and you do whatever you can to do it. So Audrey has been walking around our next bird, and this next bird is one that we're not going to fly. She's going to stay on Audrey's glove, and I'll explain to you why not in a minute. But a couple of things to point out. First of all, we've got grasping feet, and we've got a curved beak, just like the Harris hawk. But we've got this interesting thing going on the bird's head. No, that is not her natural head. That is a tool that we utilize called a hood. Hoods are essentially a way that we can take away a bird's visual sense in times where that visual sense might cause them to be nervous, right? It's like blinders on a horse. The whole idea of don't see it, don't worry about it, or what's the phrase I'm looking for about it? Out of sight, out of mind, right? I'm not worried about it. This is actually the fastest animal on planet Earth. This is a peregrine falcon. Peregrine falcons are found on every continent with the exception of Antarctica. We do have them here in South Carolina, but I'll talk about when we have them in just a moment. This is a bird that can reach speeds in excess of 230 miles an hour in a dive. They are incredibly fast, primarily bird hunters, and that in part can explain why we need to cover her eyes, and we'll uncover them in a minute so you can see what she looks like. This is actually a young bird. She's brand new to our education team this year. She came from a breeding program in Iowa where she hatched for, again, conservation breeding. The idea being that she could come and live with us and be a part of our educational team and help us share the messages that we're sharing about wildlife and conservation. And then ultimately, her offspring or her offspring's offspring could be released back into the wild if the need arises. In the 1960s, the peregrine falcon was essentially wiped out in the eastern United States. This is one of the species that in my mind, led to the sort of great environmental awakening of the 1960s. Many of you have probably read Rachel Carson's books, and you're familiar with that idea that we realized in the 1960s, because we were paying attention to what was happening in the environment, we realized that things weren't going very well. As you might imagine, a bird that travels at 230 plus miles an hour is something that humans likely have been paying attention to for a long time, right? When you see that, catches your eye, right? And so we were already paying attention, and some astute individuals noticed, you know what, I'm not seeing as many of these incredibly fast diving birds as I was a few years ago. I wonder if something's going on. And when we looked, we started seeing evidence that, in fact, their populations were crashing. And when we looked at why, it was largely because of a singular activity, and that was the use of DDT, pesticide that we use to eradicate mosquitoes and other insects, and we sprayed it everywhere, basically saying this is great. It kills all the mosquitoes, and that's better for me. I don't get bitten by mosquitoes, and I don't get sick from mosquito-borne viruses. But what we didn't realize was that when these birds ingested that DDT, and why would a bird-eating bird ingest a pesticide that we were spraying on mosquitoes? Right? It's all about the food web, right? We spray the mosquito spray out there, and it kills the mosquitoes, and they go to the ground. And what happens to a dead mosquito on the ground? A little bird comes along, right? Your little sparrows and mourning doves, and they come along and they eat that mosquito. Now the poison's in the little bird, and then the big bird comes and eats the little bird, and it accumulates up the food web, right? Same thing happened with eagles and osprey and pelicans, to the extent that we lost the peregrine falcon in the eastern United States, extinct east of the Rocky Mountains in the 1960s. Today, again, largely due to breeding programs like the one that produced this bird and releasing them back into the wild, we've seen those numbers climb to the extent that now their populations are healthy here in the eastern United States, which is a great testament to the fact that if we notice the changes, right, if we pay attention to what's happening out there, and if we do something when we notice that those changes are negative, we can fix these problems. It's not always quite so simple as stopping using a pesticide. Sometimes it's much more complicated than that, but it can happen. Again, this bird has just joined our team, and she is a really beautiful individual, a juvenile peregrine falcon. The plumage is a little different than it will be when she's an adult. Her back will be sort of a slate blue color when she's an adult. Her chest will be much paler. A lot of those speckles and spots on her chest will disappear. Now that her hood is off, you can see those large forward-facing eyes. You can see those dark feathers under the eye. That's all very falcon appearance. And she's being trained to fly to a lure. So maybe the next time we come to Bishop Gadsden, we'll fly her loose right here, but I doubt it. As you might imagine, a 240-mile-an-hour traveler has to have some space. And so she flies in a big field that we have at the center and chases a lure that looks like a bird. She uses those very long pointed wings to fold up and dive at high speed. I haven't seen anything close to 200 miles an hour from her yet, but we'll get there over time. Very long toes. If you notice when she's up close, 240-mile-an-hour dive is typically used in pursuit of other birds. She hunts things like ducks and doves and pigeons, and those long toes help her to wrap around the prey, make sure she gets something in her feet that she can hold on to. You think about birds, they've got this really great protective system built into their body in the form of feathers, and if you have short toes as a bird predator, you might not be able to catch those other animals. You might just grab feathers, and the feathers pull out, and the bird flies away, and you are left without a meal. All right, what questions do we have about the peregrine falcon? Anybody have any? Yeah. So, falconry. The question was about, is this the species that the aristocrats would use to hunt the birds, right? So falconry is this activity. It's been happening on planet Earth for 4,000 years. People figured out, hey, I can partner with this bird, and if we work together, we can catch enough food not only to feed the bird, but also maybe to feed me, and plus it's kind of fun, and so it developed over time, and in many cases, the birds that you would utilize as a falconer would reflect your status, right? The king would use the peregrine would be the king's bird, and and I'm not as familiar with the entire structure of whose bird was what, but the peregrine is close to the top, right? It's not the only bird utilized in falconry. Again, if you think about something that's been happening all over Earth for 4,000 years, you got to figure that people have done it in different ways in different places forever, right? And if we look at falconry today, we'll find people hunting with peregrine falcons out in the western part of the United States for ducks, and we'll find people hunting here in South Carolina. The most common prey we have is the one you mentioned earlier, squirrels, right? So most of our falconers here in South Carolina hunt with red-tailed hawks, and they hunt squirrels all the time. Actually, one of our colleagues at the center is a falconer, and she spends all her days during the fall and winter out in the woods hunting squirrels with her red-tailed hawk. Then there are all kinds of other falconry forms. There are the Mongolians in the steppes of Mongolia hunt with golden eagles from horseback for things like foxes and wolves. But yes, if we're talking medieval falconry, the peregrine is kind of the ultimate bird there. Wouldn't work in South Carolina, right? This is not a species that we see very often. We do get them migrating through here in the fall. They spend much of the fall and winter months moving through as they migrate from north to south. What other questions do we have? I thought I saw another hand come up over here. Yes?
Is he getting hot?
Is she getting hot? So if she does, how will we know that she's hot, right? So she opened her wings a little bit. Some of that was she saw Audrey put her hand into the bag. I don't know if you noticed that chain of events, right? There was a chain of events that led her to open her wings, and behavior kind of changed a little bit. And if you watch where she's watching Audrey's hand all the time. She knows hand goes in the bag, food comes out of the bag, I get rewarded. And I think those wings out were largely kind of excited about the potential for food. It's also a new experience for her, right? She's not been here to this location. She's not seen groups of this many folks in one place at one time. And so some of it could have just been, I'm trying to figure out what's happening. If she were to get hot, there was an interesting behavior there, right? She just puffed up her feathers and shook them off. That's called rousing. So that's a good sign that she's relatively comfortable. If she were to get hot, she wouldn't sweat like I'm doing right now. She would pant like a dog might. So birds don't have sweat glands. They can't cool off through evaporative cooling in that way. So just like a dog, they open their mouth and they pant and they move their tongue, and water evaporates from the inside of their mouth, and that cools them down. So it's not uncommon, especially here in South Carolina during the summer, to see a bird sitting with its mouth open, right? And what you know then is that bird is hot. He's trying to cool down. Yes, sir.
They hunt by eyesight. What do you know about their eyes?
Great question. So, A, do they hunt by eyesight? And B, what do I know about their eyes? A, eyesight is primarily the hunting device used by the daytime hunting birds of prey. When you look at this small bird, she weighs about 2 pounds, by the way. So just to give you a little proportion there. The Harris's hawk that we saw a minute ago, he only weighs about 1.5 pounds. So even though he looks bigger, he's not as dense as she is. So she's really compact. If you look at how large her eyes are for such a small body, you can figure how important eyesight is for her. So she's hunting almost exclusively with eyesight. So then the second question was, what do I know about their eyes? Not that much. Other than A, they're very large, right? And they have a very large opening. And that large size allows them to gather a lot of light and process images very effectively. They have a much more dense proportion of photoreceptor cells in their eyes than we do. So estimates are that a peregrine falcon has 8 to 10 times as many rods and cones in their eye per unit area than you and I have, right? So what does that mean? Right? Does that mean they see 8 to 10 times as well as we do? Probably not, but certainly they're seeing detail beyond what we see at a distance. There's good evidence that many of the falcons can see ultraviolet wavelengths of light as well as what we would call the visible spectrum of light, right? So things that we couldn't see regardless of how close we were, they can see it. And they also have multiple areas on their eye called fovea. So the fovea is where all the light focuses on the back of your eye, and one of you is probably an eye doctor, and you're going to come up to me afterwards and tell me how wrong I was, right? But the area where all the photoreceptors are really dense on the back of your eye, where all the light focuses and then it turns into an image and goes to your brain, they have 2 of those, one on the back of their eye and one on the side of their eye. So in a lot of cases, you'll see birds turning their head to the side or bobbing their head when they're looking at something, and the idea is that they're focusing that image on different parts of their eye to give them a better picture of whatever it is they're looking at. So lots of amazing things related to their eyesight, and so that eye like an eagle or hawk eye or all of those phrases that we might use are well founded, at least in terms of what we know about their eyes.
Do they have eyelids?
Do they have eyelids? Absolutely. They've got more than we do, too, which is kind of cool. They have 2 like we do, an upper and a lower, so they can close their eye. And then they have this third membrane called a nictitating membrane. And we see that in lots of animals. We have the vestige of one in our eye. It doesn't work anymore, but it's a translucent membrane that covers their eye that they can see through, so they can still process images when they're protecting their eye, right? If you think about eyelids, they're basically to protect your eyes from damage, right? Ours work really well, but they come at a huge cost, right? If you're protecting your eyes with your eyelids, you give up 100% of your ability to see things. And for a bird like this, that wouldn't work very well. So they've got the ability to protect and still maintain a little bit of that eyesight. Pretty cool stuff. What other questions do we have? I see a hand back there. Yes, ma'am. Yes. So how long has she been with us, and how long has she been in training? So this bird came to us at the end of last summer. I want to say it was like September, maybe September of this past year. So she's been a part of that program for whatever that is, 8 months, almost a year. And she is now learning that she can chase this lure and starting to fly loose in programs for demonstration. So it takes a long time for a lot of these birds to get over the hard part of being a trained bird. I've kind of alluded to it at the beginning that this is not a normal peregrine falcon. Right? She tolerates all of you, and she sits on Audrey's glove, and she's not nervous. Most of that first year is spent just, let's be together here in this space, right? And nothing bad's going to happen to you, and maybe good things are going to happen, so that you get used to the idea that this is what is going to happen. And then we start adding in some of that training and move forward. Some species move a little faster than others. The falcons are kind of high-strung. You might imagine, again, being an animal that moves as fast as they do and makes as quick decisions as they do, you kind of have to be high-strung to do that. And so it can take a little while to get them to that point. Yeah?
Will she be released?
Will she be released? So no, the birds that we utilize for our educational programs are birds that stay with us for their entire life. And we look at that as it is a challenging lifestyle for those animals, right? It's a lot to ask of this bird that she stays with us and hangs out around you and does programs like this for people. But if we provide her with adequate support and enrichment and all of those things, that it can be a life that will be a long life and a valuable life from an educational standpoint. So it's something we don't take lightly, and it's something we think about every day. The challenge of life for this bird living in captivity with us is a big one, right? And we have to be cautious that we don't take advantage of that. Yeah.
How much do you estimate that each bird costs you all per year?
So how much does each bird cost us per year? So it would depend on the bird, right? So at the center, we deal with a variety of different scenarios every year. 1,000 birds come into our avian medical clinic every year for treatment, right? So what kind of treatment do they need? Is it surgery? Is it x-rays? Is it medications? All of it involves staff time and all of those things. How long is their stay going to be, right? And how much does it cost per day? How much food do they need to eat? Rats, by the way, we feed a lot of rats at our center. Rats are expensive, right? So Audrey, how much for a rat today? $3.18 per rat. So if I kept a bald eagle for 1 year, bald eagle eats 1 rat per day. Just in food costs, $3.18 times 365. I am no good at math, so you'll have to do that math. So add in all of those costs. It's a very expensive proposition, right? Hundreds of dollars per case, even in the best case where a bird comes in with only minor injuries and we can release it just a few days later. Just the food cost, several dollars a day. I can tell you our entire budget for a year at the center is about $1.5 million, and that involves caring for our permanent collection of birds and those 1,000 injured birds every year, all the staff costs, all the peripherals, insurance, and a van and gas and all that stuff. Yes, sir. Major cause of mortality. So we said most birds don't survive until their first birthday, and that's why you have that average life expectancy that's so low. What is it that kills most of those birds in their first year? And the simple answer is it's hard to be a bird. Right? Your mom and dad say, see you later, I'm not going to feed you anymore, I'm not going to take care of you anymore, when you're like 8 or 10 weeks old and you have to go out there. Most young birds die because of what we would refer to as failure to thrive, right? They're not good at catching food, and as a consequence they don't eat, and then they get weak and sick, and then they get eaten by something, right? That's nature's most common cause of mortality for these birds, right? Don't add in the human factor. Most birds are dying just because it's hard to be a bird. Now, add in humans, and biggest issues would be cars and electrical lines and guns. 10% of the birds we treat in our hospital every year have been shot. That's a number that's really hard for me to swallow when I look at it as someone who grew up here in the low country. I grew up in the woods. I grew up hunting and fishing and all of those things. I can't understand and I can't rationalize how we would still be out there shooting a bird that is not legally hunted. It's not a hunting season. It's not confused identity. We didn't mistake that bald eagle for anything else. We knew it was a bald eagle and we still shot it, right? So we've got a lot of those human causes of mortality. The biggest one would be cars, unfortunately.
Lack of environment.
And then you add in the fact that there aren't as many good places to live, right? And all of these factors contribute to that, right? All the areas that we might change in ways that are unsuitable for those animals to live in them, right? We've got to figure out ways that we can all live together in a way that provides for all of the pieces of the puzzle, right? And why would we care, right? Why would we care if we didn't have these birds, right? I like to think that we would care because we don't want to lose diversity on the planet and these amazing animals that are so unique and special. But if we want to be real about it, if we didn't have them, we'd be overrun with rats. We'd have problems with all kinds of other pests, and our quality of life would go down, even beyond the fact that we wouldn't have the animals to watch and experience. And the things that are causing problems for them ultimately could be causing problems for us as well, right? How many of you are worried every day about the effects of DDT on you? Probably not many of you, right? Because we saw that it was causing problems for birds, and we said, you know what, probably shouldn't do that anymore because it's causing birds to disappear because it affects them. Maybe it might have a negative impact on me in the long run. Let's stop doing that, right? They can be indicators of what's happening in ways that we can protect our own welfare. Okay, we have one more bird to fly for you. He's a little one, but he's super fun. And then we have a special treat for the end of the program, but I'm not going to give away more than that yet. Yes, sir. So there's a really great question. Falcon's coming in 240 miles an hour after a duck. It happens all the time, right? How much is he going to slow down before he hits the duck? How does he prevent himself from dying in a collision with the duck, right? If a falcon hits a wall at 240 miles an hour, right, that's 240 to 0 very quickly. That's obviously death for the bird, but it's all about transfer of energy. So hit the prey and transfer as much of that 240 miles an hour worth of energy into the prey, knock it out, knock it to the ground, and turn the rest back into altitude, right? So it's typically a hit it and then go back up. And they don't slow down much before they hit it, right? They ball up their feet and they basically punch it because they want as much of that energy as possible to kill the prey in the collision. Okay, so we got this little guy out. Are you going to walk him around first and then fly him? Okay, she's going to walk him around a little bit first, so, and then we'll get him hopping around. This is an owl, so a nocturnal bird of prey. If we start with similarities, he's got grasping feet, he's got a curved beak, he's got large eyes on the front of his head, right? Those are all features that link him pretty nicely with the falcon and the hawk, but he looks a lot different. He's got a very different body shape. He's certainly much smaller, and that might lead us to some conclusions about him that may or may not be correct. A lot of you might see him and think, oh, that's a young bird. Maybe that's a baby. Maybe that's a hatchling. Well, he is relatively young. I think this bird is 2 years old now, but he is full grown. One of the things about birds that blows a lot of people's minds when we talk about it is just how quickly they grow. Remember that red-tailed hawk that we talked about earlier that gets about 10 weeks of parental care? By the time he's 10 weeks old and his parents kick him out of the nest, he's full grown, right? You do all your growth in a really short window of time when you're a bird, and then you build skill over time and all of those things. This bird was full grown when he was about 6 weeks old. This is a species native to Africa. It's called a northern white-faced owl. It's found in sub-Saharan Africa. It's very similar to a bird found right here on Bishop Gadsden's campus, the eastern screech owl. So we have 4 owl species in South Carolina, and this would be a relative of our smallest, the eastern screech owl. A couple of things that you'll notice when he's right up close to you. First of all, he's got kind of a lumpy body shape. Owls as nocturnal predators, especially lumpy body shape in comparison to that falcon that was extremely sleek and aerodynamic. This guy's kind of like a potato, where the falcon is kind of like a rocket, right? He's not built for speed. He's built for something else entirely. Stealth is the most important thing in the day-to-day life of an owl, and we'll see a little bit of that when we get him moving here. He's got this big flat face, And the big flat face is the outward appearance of his hearing system. So we talked about the daytime hunters being entirely visually driven, right? The falcon sees its prey and catches it. The hawk sees its prey and catches it. The owl, well, he can see his prey. He's got very good eyesight. But what about those nights when it's really dark or foggy, or maybe the prey is hidden under leaf litter in the forest? He needs another way to locate that prey, and that would be his hearing. He's got some of the best hearing of any animal you'll meet, some of the largest ears you'll ever see, but they're not those things on the top of his head that often trick people into thinking that those are his ears. His ears actually are on his face. So around his eyes, that big flat plate of feathers, those are what we call facial discs. Those are the outer ear of the owl. They give him kind of that flat-faced appearance. And that's the mechanism that he uses to locate food in the dark. These things on the top of his head, those are just feathers that stick up on the top of his head. We call them plumicorns. That just means feather horn. So they look like horns. Our native great horned owl has those same things. We think those are probably a camouflaging adaptation as much as anything else. They help him hide, break up his silhouette in a tree, make him disappear. Unfortunately, owls are a group of birds that are particularly vulnerable for a number of reasons, not the least of which is the fact that our understanding of them is relatively small in comparison to other birds. Why would that be the case? They're fascinating. We want to pay attention to them, but they're kind of hard to study. They hang around at night. They're active at night. They live in sometimes dense forested areas where they might be hard to see and hard to locate. If they're small like this, you can imagine the challenges that would create in terms of studying them. And so, as a consequence, there's a lot of information yet to be gained about owls and their ecology and their requirements and all of the things that we've got a visitor up here. Is it a kingbird? So we've got an eastern kingbird up in the tree here. Everybody see him? Sitting on the branches here. He has seen the owl. So we shall see how this goes, right? It's a behavior that we see all up and down the food web. It actually happened earlier at the center in our flight demonstration. The falcon that we were flying was mobbed by a crow. Mobbing is the act of a small bird trying to chase away the big, dangerous predatory bird, using whatever strategies he can. And often that involves a team approach. He's calling for all of the other kingbirds to alert them and alert everyone else in the neighborhood, hey, there's an owl down there if you haven't seen him yet. We all need to be careful, right? And if he decides to, he may fly in and try to chase the owl away. We'll keep our fingers crossed that doesn't happen. It seems that he's moved on, but I hear him still. He's still there. Just moved to another branch. We'll keep our eye on him, right? Is he a danger to this little owl? No, right? And the kingbird knows that. The kingbird knows that he's no match for this powerful predator. But he also knows that gravity is a really powerful tool that can give him an advantage in some cases, right? And by staying above, you'll notice that the kingbird does everything he can to stay up above the predator so that he doesn't put himself in a vulnerable spot. So a couple of things about the little owl as he's cruising around. You might hear him making a noise. That noise that he's making is obviously a normal noise for an owl to make. It's coming out of his mouth, but it doesn't sound very owl-like. When we think about owls, we think about hooting and all of those things that go along with it. Owls make different noises for different things, and the sound that he's making is what we would refer to as food begging. He is asking mom for food. Now, couple of things to help explain that. First of all, I don't see his mom anywhere. And secondly, I mentioned he's a 3-year-old owl. Do 3-year-old owls still get fed by their mom? No, we've talked about that, right? They get kicked out of the nest at a very young age. Well, one of the things we do with the birds that we train at the center, specifically with owls, is we raise them by hand. We know that if we want to ask an owl to do what this guy is doing, right, to be this close to all of you, to maybe fly over someone's head, to be comfortable as an educational ambassador, they basically have to think that they're people. So this bird was raised by hand, actually by Audrey. She raised him. He thinks she's mom, for lack of a more complicated description. And when he begs for food like that, what does mom do? She feeds him. And it still works, right? So he's still begging for food, even though he's well beyond that phase of life for a normal owl. couple of issues to point out as it relates to owls. We see a lot of entanglement issues, specifically with the native barred owl, which is one of our species here in South Carolina. They get tangled in fishing line and netting and all kinds of things. Another big issue is rodenticide toxicity. So I have said this many times, and some of you have probably heard me say it, but I'll often ask a group, how many of you share your space in your home landscape with rodents? Anyone? A couple hands go up, right? And then the second follow-up question is, how many of you are blissfully ignorant to the fact that you share your home landscape with rodents? Right? And that's all the rest of your hands. Right? That's everyone. They're around us, right? We can't do anything about it. We're in their home as much as they're in ours. We don't want them around us. Obviously, in certain ways, they can be dangerous or problematic. And as humans, we've come up with lots of ways to control rodent populations. What's the natural way to have rodent populations stay in control? Owls, hawks, right, other predators. But as we've seen, we humans have created circumstances that maybe aren't so pleasant for the owls and the other predators. Maybe even we work to get rid of some of those animals. And now we have to come up with other strategies to control those rodents. And one of the tools that we use are what we call rodenticides. Those are poisons like decon and all those bait stations and bait traps. Unfortunately, the thing that most people using those products don't realize is that the pesticide that we intend to use for the rodent is often poisonous to many other animals. So the bait station, put it out by I drove by Chick-fil-A on the way here. If you go through the drive-thru at Chick-fil-A, there's like 7 bait stations around that tiny little fast food restaurant. Rodent walks in, eats the bait, starts feeling sick, starts wandering around the parking lot at Chick-fil-A. What happens to a rodent that's feeling sick in the parking lot at Chick-fil-A? He gets eaten by a predator. Right? The owl flies in, eats the rodent, and then all of a sudden that poison we intended for the mouse is poisoning the bird. Right? And it might be a bobcat or a fox. It could be any predator. We've seen an increasing number of cases of rodenticide toxicity over the last few years, and it's something that is an easy fix. Right? We shouldn't use those products. They're convenient, but they're deadly to lots of animals. There are a lot of other ways to control those rodent populations. We can encourage, here's our kingbird, flying into the lion's den here for a little while.
What's the best way? Because I've seen those traps around here. I don't know what's in them, but...
Right, so first step is be aware of the traps, that they're there, right? Second step is to consider what the alternatives are, right? There are circumstances where those traps are the only option. They're the best option, right? They should be being utilized by professional pest care people. It used to be 10 years ago, you could go to Walmart and buy one, right? That's generally no longer the case, right? And then look at alternatives, right? Snap traps are great if you have a rodent problem in your house, right? Why don't people like snap traps? You know what I'm talking about, right? The old mouse trap. Why are those a less suitable option? The only reason is you have to deal with the dead mouse at the end of it, right? And nobody likes that, right? But we got to get over that, because I would much rather deal with a dead mouse in the mouse trap than have to deal with the knowledge that the method I was using was killing all those other animals, right? So things like snap traps, best way is to figure out why the rodents are creating a problem. How are they getting into your home? How are they getting into your space? And how can you prevent that, right? Excluding them from the ability to get in and cause you problems. That's ultimately the best case scenario. All right, what other questions do we have about the owl? Anybody have any? Audrey's going to keep flying them around here. Yes? How much does this owl weigh? So Audrey should know exactly how much he weighs. 182 grams. So 453 grams in a pound. That's less than half a pound, right? A little more than a quarter of a pound. Stick of butter and a half. Yeah, approximately. Yeah. Not much, right? A little guy. Yeah. Prey would primarily be insects and small rodents, maybe a small bird if you could catch it, maybe a reptile, a lizard, a frog, a toad, those kind of things would fall well within his range. Yes, sir?
You have some rather large owls in population. How much would one of those weigh?
So if we wanted to talk about large versus small owl, what are we talking about, right? So here in South Carolina, our small owl is the eastern screech owl, which is maybe slightly larger than this bird, maybe 200 grams for an eastern screech owl. And our largest owl is a great horned owl. A great horned owl might weigh as much as 1,500 grams. So that's almost 4 pounds. So from 200 to 1,500 would be our native range in size. If we're talking about size of owls worldwide, the smallest of the owls is in the range of 35 to 40 grams. That would be an elf owl, little tiny thing. And the largest owl is one called a Blakiston's fishing owl, which lives in extremely remote northern Russia and Asia. And that's a bird that can weigh close to 10 pounds, so nearly 5 kilos, which is a giant owl. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Is he never tempted to fly away? Is
So-
he never tempted to fly away? I mean,
Right. Is he ever tempted to, or maybe could he fly away? If he chose to, right now, the choice is his. He goes where he wants to go. Some birds, when they get nervous, right, so it's always an option in his head, and he's always processing it, right? He's thinking, okay, what are my options here? I could fly up in this tree where I know I'm safe, or I could fly over here to Audrey where I know I'm going to get rewarded, right? And he's weighing those options, and he makes that choice, right? When the kingbird showed up, right, all of a sudden we had another thing to add to the calculations in his head, right? So we know that it's always possible. This bird, knock on wood, has never taken an unauthorized field trip. He's only 2.5, 3 years old, right? Today could be the day. I hope it's not. We have to be ready for that. And again, that's why they all have a radio transmitter attached to them so that we can track them. Over my career, I've had to track birds a number of times. Things happen, right? Circumstances change in the environment. Even the most well-trained bird, sometimes they have an off day and they decide they're going to go do something a little different. It's more likely in circumstances like this, right? On his home turf at the center where he does flight demonstrations every day, where everything is kind of routine, likelihood of him flying off is extremely low. Here with a kingbird and all of you looking at him, right? Maybe he might be thinking about it a little more than he would be otherwise. Yes, sir.
What's happening with the bat population in South Carolina?
Bat population in South Carolina. That's a really great question that I don't unfortunately have a great answer to, although I don't think it's a great circumstance. I think bats, like most insectivores, are not doing as well as we would like them to be because of declining insect populations. It's something that we may not notice. I anecdotally have noticed, I can remember when I was a kid going on road trips in the summer, and the number of insects that hit the windshield of my dad's car was like an alarming number. It was like there's all these dead bugs on the windshield, and now I've driven across the country multiple times in the summer and no bugs hit my windshield, right? That is a reflection of insect populations here in North America, right? They're not doing well either. And so I suspect, and again, I don't know, I'm not an expert on bats, but I suspect that they are probably not doing very well simply because they don't have the prey base that they once did. Yeah. Yes, sir. What professions or backgrounds between me and my staff? That's a really great question. So the stock answer I always give to people that are interested in a career like ours would be a series of horrible mistakes will lead you to, that's a joke. That's funny and people laugh and they like it. But it's also kind of true, right? Most of us realized at a pretty early point in our lives that we like nature and wildlife and animals, and so the natural progression there would be go study biology or something of that nature. Audrey has a degree in biology from the College of Charleston. I started my studies in biology, and I thought I was going to be a doctor. That didn't work out. But I studied biology, and then I studied education, and I was trained as a teacher. And then when I realized what teachers have to do every day, I said, you know what, maybe that's not for me either. And I went back and I got a master's degree in environmental policy. So my education kind of is the junction between communication and science, teaching people about what's happening out there so we can make better decisions. Our medical staff, obviously, they come from more medical backgrounds, vet tech kind of thing. But again, in a lot of cases, it's a passion for the subject area, right? We've realized that we really like birds, and this is one way that we can help share our passion for birds with other people. Yeah, great question. Any other questions? Okay, so I mentioned we had a special treat for the end. It's not every time that we get to do this, and I'm trying to visualize how we're going to do it best here. But we have a bird that we're going to release, one that we're going to let go, and we're hopefully not going to see it again. Hopefully you will see it again. It's a bird that was treated in our medical clinic. the three that we brought with us we're taking home, but the fourth one we're leaving here with you at Bishop Gadsden. How long he hangs out here, I can't say, but it's a great spot for this species. It's one that we know you probably have around as well. I think it's probably best if you got it out. That way everybody can see it. Lost my train of thought. So I mentioned 1,000 patients a year in our hospital. We've already treated almost 400 patients this year. The most common patient that we deal with in our hospital is the barred owl. And the bird we have brought to release today here with you at Bishop Gadsden is a barred owl. Barred owls are very common. It's one of the reasons that they're our most common patient in our hospital. They are a species that we have a lot of here in South Carolina. They're also very susceptible to collision-related injuries. They fly very low. You saw that owl cruising around. They're very low across roadways. They get hit by cars a lot. We put roadways through their habitat. Camp Road here is a great example, right? Camp Road goes right through the middle of a whole bunch of great barred owl habitat, and it's dangerous to cross the lanes. Yes?
I don't think everyone knows you treated our red hawk.
Your red-tailed hawk. Yes. So, and I am not deeply aware of that bird, but there was a red-tailed hawk from here that ended up in our hospital, and I should have done my homework before I came today so that I could have updated you or let you know more about the case, but
No, you
brought him back and let him go. So it's been released. So
you fixed his leg.
great success story there. Thank you for saving me on that one, right? So we treat birds from all over the place, and the goal is always, when they come into our hospital, to get them back out into the wild whenever we can. It's not always possible. You can imagine you get hit by a car and you're a little 1-pound bird. The injuries can be significant, and in many cases there's nothing we can do to help the bird. But in some cases we can repair the injuries, and this is one of those. I've got a few notes here in my pocket. This bird has been in our medical clinic for 40 days. Came in on April the 5th for injuries that we suspect were related to car collision. This bird had a scapular fracture. So the scapula, the coracoid, we call it in birds, near where the coracoid and the clavicle meet. That fracture was fortunately not a surgical fracture, didn't require repair with pins or anything of that nature, just required some immobilization, right? The bird equivalent of a cast. We just had to keep him from moving those parts and allow that bone time to heal. The bird has been, again, in care for about 40 days, the last few of which have been in our flight enclosure, which is a reconditioning space where the bird is building the muscle back that he may have lost while sitting still in an enclosure. I suspect, based on what I can see from this bird from right here, this is the first time I've seen him, by the way, that it is a male. This looks to be a very small barred owl. Most of the time the females are larger than the males, and for a male barred owl, about a pound would be a kind of standard weight. Barred owls are dense forest dwellers. You've got them right here on Bishop Gadsden. Susan said she heard some maybe this morning even. They're the ones that say, "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all?" It's got that trill at the end. They're often associated with wetlands and relatively dense forests. So we've got some pretty good space over here. And what I think, and Audrey, maybe you can, when you figure out where you want to put him, I don't know if over here might not be the best, or you want to go here. I mean, he'll like that tree. He may not sit there for long, but again, a species that is a common one here in South Carolina. We're reaching the end of breeding season for barred owls. Their chicks are nearing fledging, so chances are this bird won't run into too much difficulty finding a space to disperse. He may have to deal with the kingbird, but he's equipped to do that, so we won't worry too much about it.
How important is it to release the bird back into a familiar environment like where he was in?
So great question. How important is it to put the bird back into a familiar environment, like perhaps where they were injured? There's our kingbird again. He's cruising around up there. In some cases, it can be very important to release a bird back into the place where it was found. Simply put, during breeding season, especially. So in many cases, we'll get a bird in that has a brood patch. That's indication that's a bare spot on their belly where they're incubating eggs. And obviously, if we can't get them back quickly, it wouldn't really matter. But if we could, we would want to put them back into their breeding territory. With something like a barred owl in non-breeding season, as long as we're putting them into suitable habitat, right? It's not a breeding issue, right? We're not putting him back to go raise his young that he left 40 days ago. It's not generally thought to be critical, right? What would his hunting range be? It could be a few miles. For a barred owl, most owls are not long-distance travelers, so they're staying relatively close. Obviously, this guy's going to have some adjustment to do. He's going to go out. He's going to be in a new spot. He's going to have to figure out where do I go and not bump into other barred owls and cause problems, right? I keep looking over here. Back here, chances are he's going to go that way. That's for him to do, and for us to wish him good luck when he's doing it, right? He may bump into some other barred owls out there that say, this is my turf, right? And when he does, then he's got to move on to find closer turf. One of the really interesting things with the daytime hunting birds, often where you release them really doesn't matter. They go back to where they came from regardless. They've got this internal positioning device that gets them where they need to be. Yeah. What's that? Is he tagged? So, no, he does not have any tags on him. Banding is a challenging thing for us because it involves training that involves an individual. And we don't currently have a bander on our staff, so we're not permitted to band them. It's a silly thing that we could talk about. But he is ready to go. So let's get him out of here, and then we'll answer any other questions you might have. All right, so wish him good luck. Oh. Did he poop on someone? It's good luck. It's good luck, I guess. He thinks he's a barn owl. He's trying to work out what the heck is going on right now. Nothing personal. I'm gonna move out from under. Everyone's clearing out. If you didn't get pooped on already, you're okay. Generally, you just go once. Oh yeah, red-shouldered hawk. So there's a red-shouldered hawk just flew over and landed on the top of that tree near the road. Red-shouldered hawks and barred owls often kind of go together. The habitat requirements are very similar. The prey is very similar. So where you find red-shouldered hawks, you find barred owls. How long is this guy going to hang out here in the rafters? I don't know. We'll watch him. While we're doing that, I want to just take an opportunity, first of all, to say thank you again to all of you for welcoming us into your backyard to come and talk about birds. We really appreciate it. Audrey and I are planning on sticking around for a few minutes. If anybody wants to come up and chat about anything, if you want to just sit and watch this barred owl, I do ask you just to be mindful of the fact that he's probably pretty nervous. He's going to move out of there, but he's probably trying to be invisible at this point. If anybody's interested in joining our newsletter mailing list, I've got a QR code over here. There he goes. We've got a QR code for that. There goes the barred owl. Off over to Susan's front yard. That was good. That was a perfect release. I've also got some rack cards that have information. If you haven't come and visited us yet in Awendaw, this has got information about how you can do that, and we'd love to see you there. But thank you again so much for having us. We'll see you next time.
Wow, what a way to start the weekend. Thank you so much. They'll be here if you have any questions, but what a beautiful specimen and what a way to end the day. Thank you.
Glad it went well.